You may commence.
Well, since I'm being interviewed, that's customary for the interviewer to ask questions of the interviewee. I guess it all begins back in 1911. No, it began before 1911. My mother spent, I think, 2 or 3 years at Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, from which she got a teaching certificate. She came west and settled in Deer Park, Washington, which is about 30 miles north of Spokane, something like that, where she was a teacher. She taught algebra, geometry, Latin, English literature. I guess that's about all.
A well-educated woman.
Very well educated, especially for her age. In college, she had been known, of course, as Nell, and had been the star of the women's basketball team. According to her, and of course she was a woman of undoubted veracity, the cry was, "Get the ball to Nell." This is back in the days when women's basketball was played in courts, so that the forwards could only come out a certain distance, and they had mid-courts, and then they had the guards at the other end. So nobody ran the full length of the...
It's still played that way in Iowa.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised in Iowa.
I don't know if it's 3-on-3 or I think it's 3-on-3, but there are a defensive 3 and an offensive 3.
And the offensive 3 cannot go past mid-court or something.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's exactly right.
Well, Iowa hasn't changed much. She also had quite a reputation around town as being the leading young lady. She told and had a very interesting anecdote about when she was in college at Cornell. Some young male friend of hers, so she would never dignify going any farther than that, took occasion to take the scrawniest rooster in the great big world, put it in a bird cage, and send it to her railway express, it would have been in those days, to Mount Vernon. Of course, this bird cage with this scrawny rooster had arrived and sat in the station for a day or so, and it was all over town. Everybody over town knew about it. And so she went down and picked up this rooster and took it back to her dorm room, where she tied a string around its leg and tied the other end to something in the room, and the rooster flew out the window, got on a tin roof of a shed or something or other, and squawked and scratched and raised an awful ruckus. And the rule was that no table in the dining hall could have anything to eat that was not shared by the whole dining hall. So here she was stuck with this rooster. Well, she arranged to get the rooster, I guess she helped her, had it anyway, butchered and picked and plucked and so on, and arranged then to have it served to her table as a private meal. And of course everybody in the campus knew about it, so nobody would leave the dining hall. And the final upshot of it was that she took the bones of this rooster, and I guess the head and the bones, tied them, wired them to this bird cage, and mailed them back to this young swain, and it ended up back up in Hampton, and in the upshot was that the joke was on him. Mm-hmm. But she was that sort of a tremendous sense of humor. Tremendous sense of humor.
And this would have been about...
Oh, this would have been about 1908, 1907, something like that.
Yeah.
About 80 years ago.
How did she happen to go to Deer Park?
How she got a job in Deer Park, I don't know. I don't know that. It was common in those days for young women in the Midwest to get to come west and find a husband, basically.
Yeah.
And there was gratitude. My father, in the meantime, had grown up on a farm, and also in Iowa, up northern Iowa. His father apparently was a pretty mean old booger. Kept these boys pretty well enslaved. And when Pop was about 20 or 21, he left home, not under, as I understand, not under the best circumstances, and came out west, and ended up in Deer Park, and got a job with a lumber company up there. piling lumber, and then he worked up from being a lumber piler up to ultimately became a lumber grader. And lumber grader was, and I guess still is, a pretty important job in the lumbering industry, because they saw up a log, and then somebody has to decide what quality that cut is. That's judged in terms of the direction of the cut, particularly in terms of the placement of the knots and so on. So a lumber grader is a pretty powerful guy, because lumber is bought by price according to its grade. And so he ended up in Deer Park, and they both ended up going to the Congregational Church, where they both sang in the choir, and that's how they became acquainted. And the pastor of the church was Perry Schrock. And then in the meantime, Mother came down with typhoid and almost died. I mean, she was moribund, but was saved when Pop, I think it was Pop, arranged with Reverend Schrock to get a nurse to come up from Spokane and nurse her back to health and so on. So anyway, and in due course of time, they went back to her home in Hampton and were married. And then they honeymooned in Lake Louise, Banff, and the Canadian Railroad on back to Deer Park, where in the meantime, Father had, I guess, had fulfilled a young man's responsibility in those days, which was to have a house bought and paid for and $1,000 in the bank. You couldn't marry ethically till you had done that. So he had his house and $1,000 in the bank, and so they got married. It must have been about a year after they were married. Let's see, they were married in 1911, maybe it's 2 years. Brother Bob was born there in Deer Park. About a year later, there was a second baby boy born that was stillborn. I didn't know anything about this until 1941. 1941, when I was driving cab in Alaska, I had to send for a birth certificate. And the birth certificate said I was the third of 4 births or something. That was the first inkling I had that there had been another one. Later on found out there had been another boy who was stillborn. So anyway, then in about when would it have been, 17, 18, something like that, they left Deer Park and moved up to Canada, Manitoba, Canada, where Pop's brother had bought a farm. So they farmed this farm during World War I, which is why Pop was not in the service, not in the Army in World War I.
Was he dodging the
No,
service, or that
no, he
just
went up there
a coincidence?
He went up there before there was any war. I don't know how many years there was, 3 or 4 years in Manitoba, cold, miserable winters and so on. And it was up there that Brother John was born.
I see.
1917, I guess it was. Yeah. Then they gave up farming up there and came back to Spokane and bought a farm in Valley Ford, which is a town about 20 miles south of Spokane, where the day they bought the farm, they made all the arrangements, and they took the paper, the contract, I guess you'd call it now, to my mother up in the hospital while I was in the process of being born. So I was born on the day they bought the farm in Valley Ford. It made 2 disasters in one day.
And the year and the date?
Huh?
The year and the date?
24th of March, 1921. So I bought this farm in Valley Ford, lived there, I guess, about 2.5 years. I have 2 vague recollections of the farm at Valley Ford. They lived in Spokane for a year or so before they moved to Valley Ford, and that was before my time. I have a vague recollection of having something to do with jumping over some sort of a little stream. And there was some sort of little creek on the place that ran alongside the manure pile. I remember something about jumping over that once too. And there was a night there was the cloudburst. Bob and John were over to the neighbor's house and the cloudburst hit. And Mother, Pop, I don't know where Pop was, he was somewhere. Mother hitched up the horse and buggy and went out to find the boys because this cloudburst was going to wash out the bridge. And so she went tearing over to this neighbor's house and got Bob and John. We found them or something. I don't remember how that John could tell you about that. Anyway, the thing I remember about that was when we got back home again, She drove the horse and buggy right into the barn, didn't stop outside down the hitch.
That was an amazing.
That was an amazing, didn't do that very often.
Yeah.
Okay, then they moved, then they lost the farm Valley Ford, got eaten out by gophers.
Hmm.
Gophers destroyed all the crops and ate all, and destroyed the water supply basically.
The water supply.
Yeah, it couldn't irrigate because the water all ran down the gopher holes or something. I don't know, I wasn't there. Mentally. So then they moved back to Spokane, moved 3918 North Maple, a house which still stands and right down the street about 4 blocks from where Andy Maple ended up living.
Huh.
And we lived there when Pop got into the lumber business again, which is the field he knew. He knew farming and lumber. He tried to make a living as a broker, lumber broker. He got an office in the Peyton building. How I remember that, I don't know. And that didn't go very well, and he was having health problems. And
This was his hay fever or asthma or whatever?
hay fever and asthma, you name it, he had it. Heart trouble, he had heart trouble all his life. Lived to be 86, but he had heart trouble. Well, he had been a frail child who was not expected to live out of infancy. And he did. He outlived everybody. But
So did he have arrhythmia then?
I think he probably had an arrhythmia, yeah. Like I have, and Brother John has, and so on. You have? Okay, it's genetic. So I think that's probably what he had. And this, of course, before they had EKGs, and so he'd have this heart trouble. He'd go to the doctor, and the doctor couldn't find anything. And anyway, then in the 1927, summer 1927, he decided we were going to move to California. Well, Brother Bob, in the winter of 26, 27, Brother Bob had been very, very ill with pneumonia. And Pop blamed it on the crowded condition at North Central High School there in Spokane, which at that time had 400 or 500 students. Okay. So he decided we were going to move to California, so he took us, mother and we 3 boys, and planted us with Uncle Tom in Richland, which at that time was a whistle stop. It wasn't even a whistle stop, you had to flag the train down. And so we spent the summer there. Well,
Tom is your dad's brother?
Yeah, Uncle Tom, my dad's brother. He's my crazy uncle. Everybody deserved to have a screwball uncle. And he was my screwball uncle. Uncle Tom and Aunt Evelyn. Aunt Evelyn was a witch, but I can spell it better than that. She was hell on wheels. Oh, God, she was awful. Brother John can tell you some stories about her, because I didn't know, I was young. Oh, but she was something else. Anyway, we spent the summer with Tom.
You were about 5?
I was 6 years old.
6.
It was the summer I was 6. Because I started school there in Richland. The first 6 weeks. Pop went to California and got a job with the railroad. Doing something I don't know. But he couldn't stand the climate. So he quit and came back, and we moved to the Spokane Valley. When about 6 weeks, so it would have been October, I guess, or November. And found a little house to rent called the French House, which was right next door to the water tank. Bob and John slept in a cot or a bed or something on a sort of a sleeping on the back porch. The roof leaked, and they had to put an umbrella up over their bed. And it was just a place to hole up temporarily. We lived there for...
What was the address of that? Do you remember?
No, it was right next to the water tank in Dishman. I can find it again, but I can't. Those days we didn't pay much attention to street names.
Okay.
Then lived there for maybe a month or so and moved a few blocks down the street to what's called the Tile House, which I guess is probably still there. Now bear in mind, this is getting the start of the Depression. And Pop does not have a steady job. We lived in the Tile House that winter. Somebody threw a snowball or a rock or something through a bedroom window and broke it. We didn't have enough money to get it fixed, so we just closed off that room. This was the winter of the blue snow that we heard your Bob and John talk about. How we had nothing to eat all winter but applesauce.
What year was this?
Would have been 1928. And somewhere, Pop knew about an orchard up near Deer Park. Abandoned orchard, so we borrowed I guess we had a car. Yeah, we had a 21 Ford, oval back window. Went up there and picked apples and brought them home and ate applesauce all winter. The only protein we had was the worms in the apples. That was the winter of the blue snow. somebody took Brother John's sled, the flexible flyer sled, and slammed it down and broke the runner. We didn't have enough money to get it welded. It was, times were tough. So we lived there till spring. Springtime came, the landlord wanted to raise the rent from $20 a month to $25 a month because it had raspberries on the place. We told him we didn't want the raspberry, he raised it anyway, so we moved. We moved from the tile house to the brown house, which is on Argonne. We lived there for a few months. It got sold out from under us. So we moved from the brown house down to the Treffry house. We lived in the Treffry house for a year or so. It got sold and we moved to the parsonage. And we lived in the parsonage for a few months or a year or whatever. And and then they found a minister for the Methodist Church, so they took over the parsonage, so we moved from that to the Dillard house. And we lived in the Dillard house just a few months, and it got sold. So the folks said that enough is enough is enough, and they got $300 somewhere and bought an acre of land. And raised another $200 from somewhere and bought some lumber. It worked out part of it with the lumber company. And built what was basically a shack. They drew the plans, and it was a 2-bedroom. Still have a picture of it. I have a picture of it I can find right upstairs. Tar paper on the outside. It had four walls, a roof, windows, no bathroom. I had a room set aside for the bathroom, nothing in it. It was a storage room, and an attic. It was up on blocks. And we had a big garden. It was an acre of ground. It was all plowed up in the garden. And
were you changing schools at all in all these moves?
No, they're all within a few blocks of each other.
I see.
They're all in Dishman within a few blocks.
And the house that your dad built, the acre, was where?
Depending which address, is 6808 East Broadway or 8303 East Broadway. 6808 East Broadway was the number that we assigned, that he assigned. You see, the brother Bob, being an entrepreneur, brother Bob,
at a very young age.
At a very young age, I think he was 19 or 20, decided that the Spokane Valley needed house numbers. So he and a friend, Dan Taylor, who turned out to be a Presbyterian minister, decided that they were going to number the Spokane Valley. So they went to town and they bought a map, I guess, and of the plat or whatever of the streets, and began assigning numbers. And they bought a whole bunch of house numbers and went up and down the streets and sold people these numbers. And they made some money out of it. I think my father was the only one who got his choice of numbers.
Oh.
No, 6868 was the number. We were in 6800 block, according to Brother Bob's calculations. And those numbers stood for years until they came in and formally did it. The county came in and formally did it and reassigned all the numbers. We ended up 8303. Just on the wrong side of the street, we were even numbers, not numbers. Well, anyway, that's Brother Bob. I think he was 20 the year he did that. So we moved always within just a few blocks of each other.
So you had the same friends in school?
Oh yeah, sure. And it got to be quite a gag if you want to sell a house, rent it to the Hartleys. Because my mother was an immaculate housekeeper and made the place look pretty good. So we ended up with this acre of ground. The house was built up on blocks. Brother Bob went out and bought a big old heavy-duty Buick. Took the body off it, which wasn't any good anyway. Hooked a rope to the back end of it, and borrowed a scoop. And he and John scooped out from under that house to make a basement.
Hmm.
Now, how they kept from tearing the clutch out of that Buick, I'll never understand, but they did. They scooped it out and dumped it out and leveled it and so on. So ultimately, we ended up with the basement. Jennifer, when she was here last spring, had to do a paper on something or other. So I told her the story about how our cow put the siding, or put the foundation. The cow who put the foundation under great-grandfather's house.
Tell me.
Well, the story was that we had no money. This is Depression time. Nobody had any money. But we did have a cow. We always had a cow and we always had a telephone. So we had this cow, and this cow gave lots of very good rich. It's a Jersey cow. Had 3 tits, 3-titted cow, which complicated the milking problem, you see. You couldn't do it in pairs. It was
That's quite a story she handed in.
well, it took some getting used to. And I did my share of milking, I'll tell you. Anyway, we had a neighbor a few blocks away who was a stonemason by trade, named Mr. Cook. And he had a couple of kids. One I remember vividly, Brother John's best friend. And so we arranged to trade milk with Mr. Cook for his labor to put a stone foundation under the house, which is enough on blocks. And so we did. So our cow, in effect, put the foundation under the house, which is a good deal for the cooks and a good deal for us. And our cow also furnished us with eggs. That's an unusual cow that provides eggs, which she did because a neighbor across the block had chickens, and we had a cow, and so we traded milk for eggs. And one of my chores during all these years was delivering
Milk.
delivering milk. Yeah. I would take a canvas sack with a strap over my shoulder, and on several occasions I remember taking milk to the Cooks, which was about probably 6 blocks away. By the time I'd get there, the milk would be frozen, and the bottle cap would be that high above the top of the glass bottle where it was frozen. That was the winter of the blue snow. We had a lot of winters of blue snow. I saw 32 below one day, New Year's Day. Okay, so
So this is now 29 or 30?
now we're now about 34. No, we're now 31, no, 1931, right after Brother Bob graduated from high school. Because he graduated from high school, we lived in the Dillard house. That was the last house before we bought, so I was 31. And times were tough. I can still remember my father saying, I think we'll have good times by 1940. And to me, you see, now I'm 10 years old.
Must have seemed like an eternity.
Well, at least an eternity, yeah. And so, in a sense, we were all in the same boat. Nobody had any money.
So there was no feeling of being less fortunate than anyone else.
No, we were all unfortunate. There were a few people who had more. My folks were very upset, bitter, I guess is the word, about Mr. Wadd. Orrin Wadd was Brother Bob's best friend. And Mr. Wadd made $200 a month selling cigars, selling tobacco products. And boy, I tell you, to sell tobacco products, sell tobacco and make money out of it was, well, that was sinful. So, but basically nobody had any money. Times were hard. But we survived. This was the Great Depression of the 30s. I can still see, standing on what passed for our front porch. We didn't have a front porch when we built this house. Instead of a front porch, we got a gangplank. Had a pair of 2x12s nailed together and made basically a gangplank.
When did the rest of the house get built?
Little by little, little by little.
Your dad did all that?
No, he was no carpenter. Mother wouldn't let him. But Mr. Edwards did all the inside trim work in return for milk. That cow basically finished that house. When we moved in, the inside studs were up. The boys, John and Bob, did the lathing. And then they, where they got the plasterer? I had to pay him. My father supported a family of himself, a wife, and 3 boys on $125 a month average. And there were months when he didn't have any money at all. And he made a plea with the local grocer, Oscar Reiner, who's a real great guy, to charge our groceries until he could pay. Oscar Reiner was another story. Anyway, Little by little, the house got finished. Got siding on it the second or third year, and foundation under it, and so on. So then in the 30s, I can still see the situation standing on our front lawn. We didn't have a lawn. John put in a lawn.
Your house faced south. Is that
House
recall?
faced north. The house faced north. House faced north. I can still stand and look across the Spokane Valley to the north and see the main lines of the Great Northern Railroad over at Millwood. And here come a string of boxcars, mostly empties, with men on them like ants.
Really? That many?
And if an hour later, here it come on going east, covered with men like ants. Men on the move looking for work. Hundreds of them on the bum looking for milk.
Well, this is not the isolated boxcar with a man in it.
Oh, no, they're all over it. Dozens of them.
On the outside of the cars? Or
On the outside, inside. They like to get in the gondola cars. They're sort of out of the weather there. Sometimes they'd ride the rods. Now, underneath the railroad car are some long iron rods that are sort of truss arranged. And if you ride, that's called riding the rods. Then between cars of a passenger train, I don't know if you've ever been in a passenger train, but they have that sort of an accordion pleated business.
Yes.
Well, outside of that, there's a place to stand. It's called riding the blinds. And you hopefully would not get vibrated, loose, or freeze to death. But times were tough. I mean, millions of men out of work. Bread lines. My mother was always a soft touch. And of course, this soon got to be known. The rumor was that the hobos had a code with which they would mark a house, where you can get food or you cannot get food, look out for the dog, all this sort of stuff. Whether or not they really did, I don't know, but this was the rumor. So my mother always fed them, because we had very much for there. So anyway, that was the way things were during the Great Depression.
You told me that your brother Bob was most affected by...
No, John was most affected.
Oh, really?
John was much more affected than emotionally.
Yeah.
Emotionally, John was much more affected. Brother Bob, you see, by the time the Depression was real bad, he was able to get out on his own. And when he was, I think he was 20, he saw an ad in the paper one day. Wanted. Young man, free to travel, must be fluent reader. So he answered this ad. And he went down to the hotel to meet these two men named Peden and Parker. And they handed him a script to read. And he read it. And they liked it. And so he was hired. And this was the beginning of the saga of the write-ups.
Which carried him...
It could still carry him. He could still do it. Okay, the name of the game was that this crew, Bob and another guy and Peden and Parker, the forum, would move into some little town, and they'd get a hotel room with a telephone, which when things were free, and a telephone book, and they would start calling businesses. And they would say, they'd call a plumbing store. So I remember the plumbing store a little bit. And they'd get a hold of the owner of this plumbing store on his telephone, all on the telephone. And say, Mr. Son, I am so-and-so with the Abilene Star, and we're getting ready to put out a special edition praising the local businesses. And we have written a story about you and your business here in Abilene. And I would like to read it to you, see if it would be all right for us to run this story. And the story will read as follows. The word plumbing comes from the Latin word plumbum, or lead, because in ancient Rome the plumbing system was made out of lead, blah, 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 blah. But since the days of ancient Rome, plumbing has shown great advances. We no longer use lead pipe, but the local plumbing, such as Mr. So-and-so, of the such and such plumbing company, interjecting the guy's name, uses only the very finest laborers material, blah, 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 blah. And this, Mr. Jones, is the kind of a story we'd like to run for you. It'll only cost you $4. You will not pay any money until the edition comes out and you have seen it. And it'll be out a week from Thursday, and we would like to run this story. If that'll be all right with you, that's what we will do. It'll only cost you $4. You don't have to pay until you see it in the paper. And Jones would say, that sounds good to me. So they would move, and they arrange with the newspaper, move on 50 miles to the next town while getting printed, and then they come back and take them around and collect them and so on. Well, Brother Bob, of course, did this for almost 6 months or a year, in the process of which he, of course, compiled an extensive library of these write-ups.
This is around inland Washington?
Oh, no, he ended up in Texas.
Oh, really?
All over the United States.
All around.
Yeah, all around. Well, that then became his standby occupation. Anytime he needed a few bucks, and then John got into it a little later on. Anytime they needed a few bucks, so they'd go to Enumclaw or Astoria or some little town and put out an edition.
You were a printer's devil for a while.
Oh yeah, that's another story. Brother Bob, you see, was very good at organizing things, getting people into them, and then turn them over to somebody else. Somewhere in this process, he ran up with a guy by the name of Dunphy. Dunphy had a little local newspaper, a little weekly newspaper. Bob went to work for him selling advertising.
This is Dishman?
No, in downtown Spokane. A county newspaper of some sort. Somewhere along the line, he met up with a printer anyway. And so they arranged to buy a printing press, old-fashioned platen press, and put it into the little shed that was part of our garage there on Broadway. And so I worked with this. I was now in the 7th grade, I guess, 7th or 8th. I was in the 8th grade. So I used to watch and work with this printer until I learned. I got as good as he was at setting type. With what's called a stick and so on. And running the press.
So this is individual letters that you pick out of a...
Individual letters. Well, we've got a California tray right upstairs.
Yes.
Individual letters in each of the little compartments. And they're not alphabetical. They're arranged strangely, like a typewriter keyboard and so on. Different. So I learned to set type and I got pretty good at it. And run the press. Then Bob got a contract to print potato chip bags for a local potato chip manufacturer down in Dishman. So, Lord of mercy, did I ever print potato chip bags? And it's the situation, you see, you got the platen that comes forward in the press, and the type is here, puts the paper against it, and then it comes back, and you take that sheet off, put another one on that goes forward, and this, got this rhythm. I can still do it.
Yes.
You pick the paper off of the stand here, put it down, you take this one off, put this in. That's how I got this drooping right shoulder.
That's the start of your bursitis.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did that for, I don't know, months.
After school?
After school, Saturdays, whenever. So I printed a lot of potato chip bags. Bob, meantime ago, was scrounging around and he's getting printing jobs. I remember he got one job, I remember not what it was about, but it involved setting a whole page of type. Oh, what a miserable job that was. But I did it. He'd pay me 10 cents an hour. What the hell?
You were. Can you talk about your education, your schools, your
Oh
teachers?
yeah, in the meantime, I'm in school, doing well. I got pretty much straight A's.
What was your elementary school?
Englishman school. My first grade teacher was Miss Williams. I had first and second. The third grade teacher was Miss Riley. Miss Riley was, I had her for 1 year. Then she decided she wanted to become a nun. So that was the end of that. I don't remember who I had after that until I got Marguerite Dockendorf, Mrs. Dockendorf, who was the wife of the local Standard Oil Station guy. And she took me under her wing and gave me elocution lessons. Took me all over the county giving readings.
What would a reading consist of?
A reading would consist of...
Other students on the program too? This was like competitions?
And competitions. Competitions, all competitions. Take an anecdote or an episode out of a... I remember doing one episode, I think it was out of... it might have been something out of Huckleberry Finn or conversation between Tom Sawyer and whoever else. Or I think I did one out of Penrod and Sam, which was similar to Huckleberry Finn sort of thing, in which I would play both roles. You see, I'd talk to this guy, then talk to the other, I'd be this, and so on. And then she also had me do a very patriotic reading, speech reading, a real patriotic speech, so raising the fist in the whole smear. But I guess that's where I got my start as a professional talker, for which I shall forever be grateful. It has stood me in very good stead ever since. I did well. Then I got into 7th grade and had to change schools. My mother had saved Marguerite Dockendorf's job for her. They wanted, at that time, I went to school in Dishman through the 5th grade. And 6th, 7th, and 8th was at Millwood Departmental, which is 2 miles across the valley, which would be equivalent to a junior high. Now, they didn't call them that, but had different teachers for different subjects, so in that sense, like a junior high. So we went, my mother arranged, and went to the school board and got a petition, the whole smear, to keep 6th grade in Dishman. So I got an extra year of Marguerite Dockendorf. She was not without her faults. She did not let us have a baseball team. She wanted us to have a kite flying contest. She also, not as far as the sports and so on is concerned, she wanted us to do dancing. She was a tap dance teacher, among other things, and so we had to do tap dancing, and she worked us on a routine with batons and so on. She was not without her foibles. Okay. Anyway, so we got over to Millwood, and academically things started to fall apart, but not badly. They didn't really fall apart like into high school. When I got into high school, things went from bad to worse, from worse to worse. I was not malicious. I was, it's a good word. See, I got this tumor in my temporal lobe back here, about the size of a cantaloupe. I can't think of the words I want. It's just about that big, right back in there. This temporal speech area.
What were you doing when were you not studying because you were too busy having fun? Or?
I was not studying because I was too busy having fun, too busy being negativistic. Negativistic is the word.
Negativistic?
Yeah, whatever they wanted me to do, I wasn't going to do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They were stupid, or they were...
well, for instance,
okay.
I'm taking chemistry. I had to, because I'm in the college entrance curriculum. As a general curriculum and a college entrance curriculum. I'm in the college entrance. I don't know why. I'm taking chemistry. You suppose I'd pay attention to what the chemistry teacher was doing? Of course not. I remember, a friend of mine, I remember who it was, we had lab tables. The lab table had a sink on the middle. The sink had a lid on it with a hole in it. Okay? So he and I would sit in chemistry class with pencils, and spitballs, playing
hockey.
Hockey, yeah. That sort of thing. But in the meantime, I was going in after school when nobody was around and stealing chemicals to take home to own chemistry lab I had in my garage. So there's something wrong there, right?
You don't know where that came from, what that influence was? Or
no.
Motivation?
No, I don't know what it was. Whatever it was they wanted me to do.
Hormones or
something, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
In the meantime, when I was in grade school, in music class, whenever they put on a program for the PTA or whatever, I was always instructed to move my mouth but don't make any noise.
Well, why is that? You're a wonderful singer.
Well, that's...
that came later?
It must have, I don't know whether it came later or whether they just didn't recognize brilliance when they saw it. In any event, when I get into about 8th grade, oh no, I was in 7th grade. I got invited, apparently I'd become quite a singer by then, a ukulele player. And I got invited to go over to the high school to perform with the student body. That's a 7th grader.
Alone?
Alone, oh yeah, with my ukulele. And I did Clementine. I got a little mixed up in the middle and stopped, and I'd start over again, and everybody laughed, and that was fine. I don't remember being particularly embarrassed about it. Anyway, so apparently I've been doing some performing by then.
Where did you learn the ukulele? I didn't realize the ukulele went back that far.
Oh, ukulele's been around ever since Hawaii.
Well, but
Oh, for me?
for you, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Brother Bob has tremendous musical talent. So does John. Brother Bob made some money and more than a little bit of fame playing the Hawaiian guitar.
Hmm.
And Brother John played the Spanish guitar, and I played the ukulele. We made a trio
Oh, they darn.
and performed together.
What were
a
you
few
called?
times.
The Hartley brothers? Is that?
I don't remember we had a name,
What sort of functions would you perform at?
oh, church things particularly. Then shortly thereafter, I started taking voice lessons.
Private?
Private voice lessons, yeah.
From whom?
From Mrs. Hanson, who's the wife of the football coach at Central Valley High School. So anyway, meantime I get into singing, and I'm a tenor. And when about my sophomore year, I won the competition as a tenor. I won it again in my junior year. This was Eastern Washington Music Festival down in Cheney. My third year, I'm a senior now, and they decided they're going to enter me as a baritone, which is all right, because what we did is we left home and went down and lived in the dorms at Cheney for 2 days. And you take a 17-year-old recalcitrant, negativistic boy and turn him loose 50 miles from home. Most anything's apt to happen. I remember getting.
And you tried to make it happen.
Yeah, and I remember getting a big black cigar and smoking that. So by the time my turn came for the competition, well, I was indeed not a tenor. Let's put it that way. Meantime, I'm singing in the church choir. I did that for years, and that never ceased to bewilder poor Mrs. Anderson, who was the choir director, because Thursday night choir practice, I was a fair to middling first tenor. But Sunday morning after Saturday night, I was barely a baritone. And she never could understand how come I was the first tenor on Thursday and a baritone on Sunday. Poor Mrs. Anderson, she was so naive.
What church was this?
Millwood Presbyterian.
Where was that?
Millwood, which is 2 miles across the valley.
What did you do Saturday nights?
Well, like my senior, what did I do Saturday nights?
Yeah.
Went to Trentwood Grange and drank whatever we could get a hold of, which was most anything we
Now,
wanted.
Grange is a bar or a
No, Grange is a Grange Hall, like a community
social
center.
hall?
Social hall, yeah. And a big dance floor,
Mm-hmm.
and they have good dances every Saturday night.
To what sort of music?
Oh.
Radio or live
right?
music?
Oh, live music. Always live music. Have little combos, and schottish, and square dance, and foxtrots, and ballroom dancing,
Mhm.
and schottish. I was good at schottish. That was my.
What is schottish? I've never heard of schottish.
Oh, da 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 da
Yes.
like that.
Yes, okay.
It's a fun thing. A lot of fun. A little rigorous for me now, but anyway. So I'd go out and drink and smoke.
Now the drinking and the smoking took place outside the Grange Hall,
Oh yeah,
illicitly.
oh yeah. Well, illicitly, I guess you call it illicitly.
And where did you get the booze?
Oh, that was no problem in those days.
Who would buy it?
One of us who looked older than the rest, we had no particular problem. They weren't very rigid, and
From a bar? Liquor store or?
No, tavern.
Tavern.
A tavern. Or I would stand outside a liquor store and have somebody give them $5 and buy something for us. That was a great salad. That was what a debacle that was. Let's take a recess here for a minute, and I'll tell you about the great debacle of the Muscatel wine. Oh yes, the saga of the Muscatel wine. Oh, I'm revealing all the sins of my youth. Confession is good for the soul. Okay.
What year was this?
Oh, this
Who
was in 1939.
So you were a high school senior.
Senior in high school.
Who were the accomplices in this?
Jerry Harrington is the principal player. Jerry Harrington, Bud Hanson, and myself, or maybe one or two others. Sam Ramey. Sam Ramey is involved too. And we scrounged up some money. We went down, stood in front of the liquor store, and got a guy to buy us a gallon of Muscatel wine. Bad mistake. Dead of winter. Foot of snow on the ground. Colder than a witch's chest. It was awful. So we go to a dance, local dance. We we're not in the Grange this time. We were someplace close in. Started sucking away on this gallon of Muscatel wine, and each and every one of us, and particularly Jerry, was solidly bent on getting at least his share of this gallon of wine. Muscatel fortified sweet wine. You talk about a mistake. Drunk? Oh, Lord of mercy. Sam Ramey, we took Sam Ramey home. Didn't dare take him in the house. So we took him out into the barn, and where he had a horse. I remember that horse, long gray hair, awful shaggy looking thing. Sam decided that old Barney looked cold. He was going to build a fire to get warm there in the barn. I don't know if he drunk he would have done it or not. Meantime, we had Jerry, which didn't know what to do with him. And he couldn't find his ankle with either hand. So, but he had a tent in his backyard because he'd had lung trouble, and they decided he needed fresh air. That was custom of those days. So we took him home and put him out in this tent. Now bear in mind it's around 0 outside.
Oh,
He was drunk out of his mind.
could have frozen to death.
Yeah, he could have frozen to death real easy or hypothermia. And covered him up with all the blankets he had, which was plenty, and probably the only thing that saved him. And went home. I hadn't been home in bed very long till the phone rings. And Mother comes in and wakes me up, and she says, "Where's Jerry?" I don't know, he left with some guys. She said, "Okay, he left." And she came back. Said, "Okay, now where's Jerry?" So I says, "He's in his tent." So Jerry's mother called Jerry's mother. She and her sister went out to get him in the house. They got him as far as the door, and they put one hand on each side of the door, and he wouldn't get. Oh, they had an awful time. I don't know how we kept from killing the guy. That was just stupid. But we all survived.
So who were your other frequent partners in crime?
Well, Jerry Harrington, Bud Hanson, and I were 3. See, Maynard and John Lant were 2 years ahead of us.
Oh. So
Bill Eagle.
They were your mentors.
No, they were sort of off to one side at
Really?
that time. Yeah, they were more off to one side at that time. Bill Eagle was another one. Matter of fact, Bill was the E of the HH&E.
HH&E.
Hartley, Harrington, and Eagle. We had a club. No girls allowed in
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Starting from when?
Oh, probably 8 years old, 10, something like that. We all started school together. And went all the way through school together. So Bill Eagle now lives over in Squim. That's another story. Okay, so in due course of time, I graduated from high school kind of barely. 85th out of 105.
You really can't figure that out.
No.
You just didn't care much.
Didn't care much. Oh, I guess one of the highlights of my high school career was my senior year, spring of my senior year, the music teacher, whose name I can't come up with. I can see him, but I can't say his name. Anyway, got sick. He was a band teacher to begin with. He didn't know anything about vocal music. Meantime, I'd been going to state chorus and all that for several years, and so, and choir work and private lessons and so on. So I took over and taught chorus in high school. I scrounged a genuine baton. It had been broken, but shortened by about that much, but it was all right with me. And I taught those kids some music.
Huh.
Phrasing, crescendos, diminuendos, all of that stuff I knew something about today.
Was discipline a problem?
No problem at all with discipline. Not a bit.
That's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think so. I was a leader. That was part of my problem. I was a leader. And, president of the student body and all that. In spite of being a horse's ass, I was president of the student body and all those sorts of
Now
things.
tell me about how that happened.
I was popular.
Why were you so popular?
Well, who knows? Anybody's popular.
Did you did you campaign for this? honor, this distinction?
No, I had a campaign manager who did the campaigning
How
for me.
how did these things work in those days?
Not like they do now.
Buttons and
I
or
don't
some
remember any
publicity
buttons.
sort of thing, or you make a speech in front of the
Make a
supervisor?
speech. I don't remember. It's been too many years. I don't
Yeah,
remember how it worked. Anyway, so I was popular, and Jerry and I were sort of two of the ringleaders of the whole schmear. My football career, we talked about a little bit last night, was not outstanding. I played a little bit, enough to get a bad hip out of it. Still bothered me sometimes. I blame it on my football injury, you know.
Did you play basketball too?
No, I wasn't big enough basketball. Not tall enough. No. And meantime, I had a girlfriend, June Schultz. We went together for 2.5 years. And I stupidly, or no, not stupidly, brutally
Oh.
brutally dumped her
Hmm.
the night of our senior graduation from high school, senior graduation class. Got drunk and awful. I don't want to talk about that. Although I saw her at a class reunion 3 or 4 years ago. We had a long talk. She up and married the guy who was pursuing her at that time. And I was number 1, he was number 2, and then I stupidly got out. Not stupidly, brutally is the word. Unceremonious and all that. She married him, and they turned out to be very, very successful.
Hmm.
Except that she sang in the Billy Graham choir. But aside from that, I don't know how that would have worked.
Yeah, that's probably good fortune there.
That's why I keep saying it wasn't stupid. But anyway, brutal but not stupid. So I graduated from high school in June, and went to work for the White Pine Sash Company.
Which is where your dad was working?
Yeah, Pop got me a job down there, working graveyard shift, making casket boxes. And that went on for most of the summer till the union found out that I wasn't old enough to work graveyard shift, and so they moved me over to another part of the plant, and I did that till fall. And then in the fall, I quit and took a drive, what do they call it, share the ride sort of thing. I did the driving to take 2 old men to San Francisco. I did most of the driving. Varney and his son-in-law, whatever his name was. Varney was a pretty good driver. He was so old he couldn't see. The other guy could see all right, but he was a horrible driver. So I did most of the driving to San Francisco as the World's Fair. My brother Bob and John were down there at the time. I stayed with them for a couple of 3 days, went to the World's Fair in San Francisco. Came home. In the meantime, I got home and found out that my father had somehow got me an appointment and got me a job at Spokane and Eastern Bank. Started out as a bank messenger, $60 a month. And so I worked there for 1.5 years. Finally got to be a bookkeeper. Went from a messenger to the blotter to a bookkeeper. And meantime, Maynard had moved up. Maynard had a brother up in Anchorage. And the brother wrote Maynard letters, says, "Come on up, I got a job for you." So Maynard went up, and he was up there a couple of weeks. He lived right across the street from us, on Broadway. He wrote me a letter, says, "Come on up, I got a job for you." So I quit my job at Spokane and Eastern after I worked all night trying to find 2 cents. I was off, my book struck off 2 cents. It took me all night to try to find it. In those days, you didn't go home till you found it.
Hmm.
You know, if you're writing, looking at a check and it says $47.29, and you read it 27 cents, you're off 2 cents. You spend all night looking for it. I'd worked all night. Anyway, long story. Quit my job, went up to, got on a boat.
Living at home all this time?
Yeah, living at home. Got on a boat in Seattle, steerage. That's 2 decks below the cattle. And went to Anchorage. Got off the boat in Seward. Got my introduction to Alaska right there in Seward. Boat docked about 10 o'clock in the morning. So in the meantime, I met a kid named Binkley on the boat. He was going up for looking for work. So we walk over to the railroad station, and I woke up the station master who was sitting there sleeping. Said, "What time does the train for Anchorage leave?" The old stationer said, I don't know, what time's the train, what time's the boat get in? I said, oh, about 20 minutes ago. He said, well, the train will probably leave about noon then. That's good enough. So I arrived in Anchorage about 5:30 in the afternoon. This was in early June. In Anchorage at 5:30, and I was working by 6:30. They put me to work driving a whoopee wagon. The cab stand rented a little cubicle from the liquor store. And in exchange for the rent, they delivered liquor.
Oh,
For the liquor store.
I see.
And they had a Willys step van. You drove standing up.
Huh.
So my job was driving the whoopee wagon. So somebody called the liquor store and sent me over a fifth of Jim Beam. So I go to the liquor store, pick up a fifth of Jim Beam, and they give me an address, and I go deliver and collect the money and so on. And that was how I learned the town, which is a really easy town to learn because the streets were lettered first, second, or numbered first, second, third, and fourth from the waterfront up, and they were lettered east and A, B, C, D, and so real easy. I did that for maybe a week. Then I got a cab and spent from then about 6 weeks, I guess, driving cab in Anchorage. Anchorage at that time was a wide open town. It was a federal territory, yeah. So the laws were federal laws, such as there were. Wide open gambling.
If it wasn't a federal law against it, it was legal.
It was legal, yeah, which meant gambling was wide open, legal. Green money on the table, the whole smear. Prostitution, wide open, legal. I got quite an education. I was baby-faced, and I had to lie about my age. To get a license, I had to be 21. I lied and told them I just turned 21. They looked at me askance and said I have to bring in a birth certificate. So I sent for one, but I never did get around to taking it into them. I got to be quite a pet of a couple of these houses of ill repute. Oh boy, if I didn't have some experiences with those women. Just one example. Got a call one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, on about the 29th of some month. It would have been July, I guess. Send Richie over to the log cabin. No, the White House, So I go to the White House. It's a house of ill fame. It's a 2-story job. And I knock on the door, and the madam stuck her head out an upstairs window and looked down and saw me and said, we'll be right down. So the next thing I know, the door opened and here they come. 7 drunk whores. Now these weren't prostitutes. These were whores. 7 of them, drunk. And they pile in my cab and say, take us to the Lakeshore Club. Okay, so I take them out to the Lakeshore Club. Pull up in front, the place is dark. They bang on the door. Bartender had an apartment up above. He stuck his out the window, saw who it was, so I'll be right down. So he comes down, he opens up the door, in we go, and he locks the door behind us, and there we are. Mike, whatever his name was, and the bartender, and me, and 7 drunk whores. Come on, Richie, let's dance. Come on, let's dance. I want to dance. All night long. It was awful. Finally get them back to their place of business. And one of these gals tossed us a silver dollar tip. All the money up there was silver, and we didn't like paper. I didn't see it coming, and it hit me. And I ducked, Next thing I know, here are these 7 drunk ladies of the night. No, they're whores. Pelting me with silver dollars. I'm covered up. The same 7 on another following month. That must have been June, must have been July. Anyway, following month, wanted to go horseback riding. Anyway, we had a business arrangement. I'd pick up a fisherman at the dock, and he would say, kindly, good taxi driver, would you please take me to a place of ill fame? That's not the way he'd word it, but I knew what he meant. And so I would take him, say, to the cottage, and we'd go in. It was customary to always, when you pick somebody to a bar, it's just come on and I'll buy you a drink. That was customary. And obviously we couldn't drink all the drinks that we were offered. So I'd go in with them, and the houses at that time would have maybe a house, quite an ordinary everyday house. You go into the living room, and there might be 5, 10, 15 guys sitting around in there, and maybe have 3 or 4 working, 6, half a dozen working girls. And they would say, they'd buy drinks for the house. And I'd always order a straight shot. So they'd go back into the kitchen, they'd come out with a tray full of booze and drinks and so on. They'd always come to me first, and pointing toward me would be a shot glass. I'd take the shot glass, and in due course of time, we'd have a toast and I'd gulp it down, thank everybody and leave. Guess what it was? Tea.
Ah.
Weak tea.
Mm-hmm.
Looked like whiskey. And the guy was paying the house $2 for me to have a shot glass full of tea.
Yeah.
So they liked it, I liked it. When we go to a bar, the routine was, I'd take off my hat, lay it on the bar, and order a bourbon and Coke. They'd give me a bourbon and Coke without the bourbon. But they charged the bar for it, so
yeah.
everybody's happy. So I got quite an education that summer. We saw some very interesting sights. Then later in the summer, it must have been middle of July, or August maybe, picked up a fare one day, take him out to the base to look for a guy who was looking for somebody to hire to go to work. And the conversation led around, he couldn't find this guy, conversation led around, he was looking for men to go work in a gold mine. So the little conversation led around, I signed on to go out and work in this mine.
The name of the mine or its
Peters
location?
Creek. Peters Creek Mining Company, right at the foot of Mount McKinley. So I quit my cab driving job and bought myself a wool sleeping bag and some wool clothes, and we got on an airplane and flew out to Peters Creek Mine, where I went to work. Worked 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and no place to spend your money. So I worked out there for about, well, until we got frozen out in the middle of October. When it was freezing, there was a hydraulic mine, placer mine. He had a humongous big diesel pump. Pumping water started out in a 12-inch pipe. And ultimately my job was running what's called the giant, or the nozzle that washes the rocks and stuff down through the sluice boxes. It came out of a 3.5-inch nozzle. So you take a 12-inch head of water out of a 3.5-inch nozzle, it really came out with support. It started freezing in the pipe. So we got frozen out. And also had a big fire that burned down the shop and so on. So that was the end of my career out there. Went back to Anchorage, drove cab for another couple of weeks. 2 nights in a row I got a hold of drunks. One of them was a drunk man, the other was a drunk woman who couldn't remember where they lived, which is not real unusual because they were just there temporarily and they weren't very sure where they were to begin with. Neither one of them would pay me. The second one was a little Finnish woman. A little bitty thing. I get a call to go to this house to pick up this fare, and I get there, and this woman comes out with this very drunk little woman. And she paid me the fare, which was 50 cents, to take mother home. Fine. So I get in, I say, where do you live? I live by a white picket fence. Great. What street do you live on? I live by a white picket fence. Well, we cruised all over Anchorage looking for a white picket fence. I wasn't smart enough to go back to where I picked her up. So I finally get her home. I said, okay, that'll be $1. She said, my daughter paid you. I said, yes, your daughter paid me to take you home. She did not pay me to drive you all over Anchorage. Now that'll be $1. Well, then she's had some things to say to me concerning my ancestry, some of my personal habits, some of my ethics, and so on. A little bit of things, standing there pounding me on the chest with her fist. Cold, snow on the ground. I finally got fed up, reached back in the cab and picked up her sack of groceries and sort of distributed them out in the snow. Got in the cab and drove away. Next morning, who shows, when I got there, I knew where she was, and I knew where it was. That was a Lynx mink farm. And the Link boys were Finns who stood about 6 foot something or other, great big husky bruisers. When I got there, I wasn't about, she said, one point she said, she come in the house, I'll pay you. I said, oh, no. So, next morning, who shows up at the cab stand after I'd gone to bed, but a couple of these sons. They were mad. The driver had thrown their mother's groceries out in the snow. Boss says, yeah, I understand that your mother called him some pretty nasty words. Says, yeah, Ma got a pretty nasty tongue when she gets drunk. Welsner says, well, I'll tell you what, I think we better just forget the whole thing. Don't bother calling the yellow cab again because we ain't coming. So they stomped out and that was the end of that. So, anyway, get home in this November now. Come outside on the boat and fly home from Seattle. Bud Hanson and I are together. Maynard, in the meantime, has signed up for the cadets.
How common was it to fly around in those days?
If you wanted to go anywhere, you flew, but nobody went much anywhere. Yeah, the only way, well, it could get it to the mine by railroad and car, but it was quite a chore, much easier to fly.
But you flew from Anchorage to Seattle, or from Seattle?
Oh, no, we took a train from Anchorage down to Seward and then caught the boat from Seward on out. No.
But then you flew from Seward from Seattle to Spokane?
Yeah, that's all. So we got home and I hung around town for...
And you quit pretty much because it was getting dark and cold and you weren't...
Yeah, and we were in Anchorage and I wanted to go home. I'm 20 years old and I want to come home.
Yeah.
Well, I hung around Spokane for a month or so. And on the night of Saturday, December 6, 1941, I got on a train to go to Portland, where Brother Bob and John are living. I get off the train in Portland on the morning of December 7, 1941. Brother John meets me at the train. He says, have you heard the news? And I said, what news? He said, the Japs have bombed Pearl Harbor. We're at war. I said, oh. So in Portland, I, Brother Bob, again. Immediately, of course, there's dreadful fear that the Japs are going to bomb the whole West Coast and so on. So it's blackouts. So Brother Bob, in the meantime, was selling paint. So he and I go down through some of the grungier hotel district of Portland to sell blackout paint, persuading hotel owners to paint their windows black to comply with the blackout regulations of wartime. I don't remember whether it sold any or not, but that was...
Did Bob have a sense of humor? Did he do this with a twinkle in his eye, or was he...
That's never been real clear. He has a twinkle in his eye about it now. Oh, I'm sure he did, sure. He knew what he was doing. It was legal.
Sure.
I don't know how ethical it was, but it was legal. Okay, so I worked at Sears selling neckties during Christmas rush, and then I went to the First National Bank and waltzed up to the personnel man and said, do you ever hire bank bookkeepers without starting them out as messengers? And he said, I don't know, are you a bookkeeper? And I said, I kept books Spokane and Eastern. Spokane. He says, well, how would you like to start tomorrow morning? I said, fine. He said, okay, you go 6th and Morrison Branch and talk to Mr. So-and-so. So I did, and the next thing I know, I'm bookkeeper for a bank in Portland, just like that. And I'm working there one day, and where my desk was, where my machine was, it was on a balcony overlooking the lobby. And who waltzed into the lobby with this kid Binkley I'd met on the boat.
Huh.
So I bail out, go down and have lunch with him. And he's getting ready to leave town. He says, you want a job? And I said, I sure do. I didn't like that. I didn't like the machines they had us run. So he introduced me to a guy named Fred Fuge, and I went to work for Simmons Company, Simmons Beauty Rest Mattresses, as a sort of a stock boy, inventory and so on. Meantime, Brother John had gone to IBM school, learned to run IBM punch card accounting machines. And he persuaded me also. So I went to IBM school, learned to run IBM punch card accounting machines. And about the time that Simmons was phasing out, because he couldn't get steel to make any mattresses with, for civilian consumption, I signed on to the shipyard. In the meantime, I signed up for the aviation cadets. Went down and took the test and came out way high on the mental, and the physical was perfect and so on. So I'm now an aviation cadet, and they told me, you know, we got a backlog, you'll be called in 3 to 6 months.
So why did you choose aviation?
Well, Maynard was a cadet. John Lant was a cadet. I didn't want to slog around in the mud. I don't like the idea of drowning.
You were sure of being drafted.
Oh yeah, no question about that. I was prime.
Yeah.
So I figured, pilots.
While you had your chance, you were going to take your choice.
Yeah, I had my chance to take my choice, and so I decided I wanted to fly. I didn't really want to fly. I decided I did not want to slog around in the mud. I also decided I did not want to drown at sea, so that was about all that was left. And so they told me 3 to 6 months. So at the end of 6 months, I quit my shipyard job, moved back to Spokane.
What were you doing in the shipyard?
IBM,
I see.
in the payroll department.
Okay.
I moved back to Spokane, moved home again,
You're waiting for the call.
waiting for the call. And I get a Saturday night at the drive-in, it'd be like the DQ in the university place. And who I run into but my friend Sam Ramey, kid that lived a half a block from me in Spokane. He said, "When did you get back?" And I said, "Last night." He says, "You want a job?" And I said, "Sure." He says, "Okay, I'll fix it up." This is on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, the phone rings. This is something of the Walter Butler Company in Farragut, Idaho. I have a requisition here for your employment. I'd like to have you report here this afternoon, blah, 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 blah. So I go out there that afternoon. I didn't have any wheel, but I ran a board pop car or something. Anyway, I go out. Sure enough, I got a job. I'm an expediter. Now, normally an expediter is a guy who knows all the ins and outs, right? Knows how to expedite, to grease the wheels, to get things moving, etc., solve problems, basically.
At a company?
Sure. An expediter is a problem solver, to expedite the situation. Well, come to find out, Walter Butler Company was building the Naval Training Station there at Farragut on Lake Pend Oreille. And they had been buying plumbing supplies from an outfit in Newport News, Virginia. Name which you can't remember. And they kept getting invoices from this plumbing supplier for jillions of dollars worth of plumbing pipes and fittings and so on, from which the Walter Butler Company had no record. So my job, should you choose to accept it,
was to find the pipe.
was to find the pipe. So the highlight of my career was I started out one day to find $40,000 worth of 3 and 4-inch black steel pipe that the Butler Company was being charged for that they had no record of. So I checked with the gate and found out that a box car with that number on it had indeed entered the project. And I also found out that it had left empty. Well, in the meantime, I'm living with Bud Hanson, Sam Ramey, Tom Duncan, a couple other guys. But particularly Bud Hanson, myself, and Tommy Duncan had met these 3 girls that lived on Hayden Lake. And so we would all go to work in the morning and work as much as we did, which wasn't much. Stop at the girls' place after work for cook the supper, then go on into Coeur d'Alene to the Foresters Club, where we would dance and drink and one thing and another until they closed it at midnight. Take the girls back out to Hayden Lake, then go back to Coeur d'Alene, where we had a pad of sorts. Sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 of us in bed at once. Lots of nights I slept in the car and get back to work at 8 o'clock in the morning.
A young man's cheerful existence.
Boy, was it. So one night, so this particular day was one of the nights I'd spent in the car, I guess. Anyway, I went to the motor pool and I check out a pickup. I drive way to hell and gone out to the other edge of the project where I didn't think anybody bothered me when I caught a few winks. I find a railroad siding out there, sitting alongside this siding, and guess what? A whole carload of 3 and 4-inch black steel pipe. I do an inventory on it, and it's the numbers all add up. Figured, I don't know what happened was a boxcar came in and had this pipe on it. And somebody came along with a cherry picker and picked it up, set it off on the siding, set it off on the ground in the grass, drove away, and there it's at. But I did that as long as I could stand it. But my constitution wouldn't tolerate that sort of a life. So I quit that job. Then I went to work for the Dishman Motor Company driving wrecker. I didn't know how to drive a wrecker, so that job didn't last long. And then I went to work for the courthouse for the automobile license renewals, and I did pretty well there. And then on the 20th of January, I get my letter. Report to...
42 then.
Huh?
1942?
43.
43. So all of 42 you're busy.
Yeah, all of 42 I'm dinging around.
I see.
43, 20 January 43, I get a letter report to SAC, San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center, San Antonio, Texas. And so I do, and then now I go through classification center, survived that with no problem. And then that was 4 weeks or something, and nothing. Well, it was of something, because, you know, the adage in the military is keep your eyes and ears open, your mouth shut, and don't volunteer. Well, asked for volunteers one day. I was getting bored, so I volunteered. There were about 4 of us volunteered. And so we report, and they load us into a truck, back into a 6x6, and take us across to town to Kellyfield, where we're going to be guinea pigs in an experiment having to do with a new nasal spray to open up your sinuses for altitude changes. So they take us in there and they put us in the altitude chamber, squirt our nose full of this stuff, put us in the altitude chamber, take us up to 20,000 feet or something, pump it on the air, take us up to 20,000 feet, bring us back down again. We're half an hour or so. We have to be back on base by 5 o'clock. So we got all day long. We got this black driver. So we arranged with him to drop us off in downtown San Antonio. And he dropped us off in downtown San Antonio to pick us up again at 4:30. So we had all day. Everybody else was confined to post. See?
This is a great coup.
Yeah, great coup. So I learned something about volunteering. So we had a good time, and I met a nurse and one thing and another. Anyway, in due time, I go sent into, or pass pre-flight and go to primary. Primary flight training in Brady, deep in the heart of McCulloch County, deep in the heart of Texas, right square in the middle of downtown Texas. And my instructor is a guy named McCowan. He was one mean son of a bitch. That's the only way I can describe him. And we'd go up, and if I did anything wrong, this is not just me, all of his students. See, he would sit in the front seat, and we were sitting in the back seat. And if we do something wrong, he'd take the stick and bang it back and forth like that. Our knees were black and blue on the inside, like that with the stick. Well, I finally got fed up and quitting. Petitioned to the, well, actually, I think all of us did. He washed out 2 or 3 of us. He had 6 students, I think he washed out 3. There was 3 of us who were left to petition for a new instructor. And I got a new instructor with the name of, I can see him, I got a picture anyway, can't remember. Now you had to solo by 12 hours or you're in the inventory, simple as that. I've got about 11 hours and 30 minutes and I haven't soloed yet. So this new instructor of mine picks me up on the flight line and we start taxiing out, take off. He says, I've got it. I'm taxiing, he says, I've got it. Talking to us knows a Gosport. Now Gosport was he had a funnel on the end of which is a rubber hose hooked into earplugs. So if the instructor really wanted to get your attention, he'd hold that funnel out in the slipstream. That would get your attention.
Sure would.
Might blow your eardrums, but it sure gets your attention. So he says, okay, I've got it. And he taxied way up in the corner of the field. It was a grass field. Shut off the engine, he kind of got out and came back, sat on the wing, said, okay, what's the problem? So I said, well, I think the problem is I don't understand the logic of what I'm trying to do. I don't understand why you recover from a spin the way you do. He said, oh, all right, crank her up. So we cranked it up, taxied back. He takes me into the operations building, whatever it was, and gets down a working model. Says, okay, here's how an airplane works. And he explained to me how the airlines work, the rudder works, elevators work. And then he explained to me what happens when you get into a spin, why when you're spinning you're not flying anymore. So the thing you have to do is you have to get out of that spin so you can fly. And when you get out of that spin in order to fly is you have to do this. When you do this, then that happens. When you do that, then this happens, and then you're flying and you can fly away. Oh, okay. She says, okay, let's go. So we go back up, get back in the airplane, take it up. I do a spin or two for him, a couple other whatever it was he wanted me to do. Come back in and land and says, okay, take her up. So sold it.
Was that difficult, anxious, I suppose?
Oh yeah, you bet. Yeah. Yeah, it's anxiety. It's an anxiety situation from two perspectives. First of all, you can kill yourself real easy, you know, those things. But I had no problem. Some of the guys had problems. They would come into land and get scared, pick it up and go around and try it again. Some of them thought we were going to have to shoot them down. I had no problem. So once I understood the logic, what it was I was trying to do and why it would work, yeah, I went sailing on through. They washed out. Well, I'll tell you, I came out of pre-flight cadets in a class of 26. There were 26 of us in my flight. We all went to primary. And the survivors from primary went to basic, and the survivors of basic went into advanced. If you survived basic, you're in pretty good shape. There were 26 of us went into primary, 6 of us got our wings.
Now, how much of that was just not having the flight skills, and how much of that, as I understand it, there was quite a bit of sort of military academy razzing and
well, the hazing,
spit and polish and that sort of thing.
Now the hazing was all done in pre-flight. Spit and polish hazing was in pre-flight. Once you got out of there was no problem. The hazing in pre-flight was good. Well, we put 3 guys in the hospital from hazing. In fact, it was so bad that ours was the last class, at least at that base, to go through that. They forbade it after us. All sorts of bizarre things. They couldn't touch you. An upperclassman could not touch you without your permission. But he could order you to do all sorts of bizarre things. So it was pretty bad. And we had several guys who just said, "Bit on it, I don't want to do this anymore." And one guy got so upset one night that he up and slugged an upperclassman. About 9 o'clock one night, by 9 o'clock in the morning, he was in the infantry. The logic behind it, I think, was fairly good, and it might have some relevance to what went on at the Vincennes here. And that is, if a guy can't keep his cool, the time to find it out is when he's on the ground. I'm not real sure how realistic a test this is, but if a guy can't going to keep his cool.
There was some reasoning behind it.
There was some rationale behind it, yeah, to see how well the guy could train himself. So I went through pre-flight with no particular problems. I remained as unobtrusive as possible, inconspicuous.
Kept your nose clean.
Kept my nose clean. If somebody ordered me to do something bizarre, well, I would do it, and that was all I was supposed to that. Then I went through primary and was one of the few survivors there. Went through basic. And
so what flunked people out of primary?
Inability to fly.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. Well, who knows?
Yeah.
It probably has to do with eye-hand coordination more than anything else. And aptitude for it. Some guys apparently have it, some apparently don't. Mm-hmm. I think about this when I watch your mother drive.
She's proficient, but...
Yeah, but she's not good. She's driving down the highway, and she's like this with the wheel all the time. She's getting the wheel set and going. That sort of thing may have been what it was. Who knows?
Yeah. Nobody
ever knew. All we know is a guy would come down from flying, and the next thing you know, his name would be on the bulletin board for a check ride. And he'd go for a check ride by a senior instructor, and once in a while somebody would survive a check ride. mostly not. So you ever got a check ride? Well, oh, we all had at least one check ride, but that was a formality. But if you got a premature check ride, well, the chances are very good that you're in the infantry. Or maybe if you're real lucky, you get to be a navigator or a bombardier or something. So anyway, so I went to cadets, B-20, and then assigned from, when I got my wings, again, I graduated with a guy from Spokane, who turned out to be a policeman over there later, and we get in his car, we're going to drive home. 35 miles an hour. That was the speed limit.
Gas ration.
Gas and tires, particularly tires. We get as far as Ogden, Utah, and his car goes sour on us. So I go down, get on a train in Ogden. A fateful train, I might add. One evening, wake up in the morning, I have a berth, a sleeper. Wake up in the morning, somewhere around Pocatello. And here's this dolly sitting across the aisle a couple of seats ahead. And I have a magazine, Coronet, Christmas issue. This is December, I graduated on December 5th, so this would have been probably about the 7th.
43?
43, yeah. Yeah, cadets are roughly almost a year. So I left the magazine on my seat, went up forward to the smoking car, smoking compartment they had on railroad trains in those days. And when I came back, my magazine was gone, and this dolly had it. And so I went to replevin it. And the rest is history. The rest is history.
So why don't we finish up by just you describing
The war?
But well, you and Mom, and until say you got married, since you were.
Well,
You've led pretty much separate existences until after the war.
yeah, you could say that. Okay, so we met in the morning, and I took her to lunch on the dining car, and then to dinner in the dining car. And then at night, there was a layover in Pendleton while our car was dumped off in Pendleton. I guess it was going to Portland, and the SPNS train from Portland to Spokane would come by Pendleton, pick it up, take it on into Spokane.
A lot of military people on the trains,
Yeah.
I guess?
Oh yeah, lots of military. Virtually nobody but military. So we get into Pendleton, and we have, I don't know, 4-hour layover or something. So we get out of the train, we go up into beautiful downtown Pendleton, and go to the Pendleton Hotel, where they had a little dance floor and a jukebox, and we danced and had a drink or two, nothing elaborate or extensive. And supposed to pull out at midnight, so about I guess at 11 o'clock we went back to the Red Cross, had a tent where they served coffee and donuts, got that. Then we were looking for a railroad car, and it was gone. So we inquired around, found out they'd put it on a siding way out across the yard somewhere, so we stomped out across the railroad tracks in the dark and found her car. And she got into her berth and got into mine, and we woke up in the morning in Spokane. My folks were there to meet us, or meet me, and I introduced her to them, and she was working at Phelps Field in Spokane in the tower, and been at home because her mother was moribund, dying of cancer. And so, I think, how did this work? I guess it was at that time that I sent her mother a bunch of flowers. Yeah. Anyway, so we had a date for that night, and the next night, and the next night. And the next I was home, I think, 5 days. And we went out every evening. And then I had to get on a train and go back to Fort Worth, Texas, B-24 school.
When did you decide or chosen or applied for, how did you get into the bomber track as opposed to?
Had no choice.
Let's see, that was assigned to you.
I was assigned, yeah.
Were you in that track from the beginning then, or?
Nobody knows. I don't know.
You got a letter, or?
Hmm?
You got a letter, or your name was up on a bulletin board? Or?
No, just a case of you graduate I graduated from cadets as a second lieutenant, and I have you hand me a mimeographed sheet of paper. It says the following personnel will report such and such a date to Tarrant Field, Fort Worth, Texas. The commanding officer for blah 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 blah. So I said, where and what in the hell do they have at Fort Worth? Well, they have at Tarrant Field. Somebody said, that's a B-24 school. I said, oh, okay. So well, we all went to B-24 school together. Several of apparently a good part of my particular class, out of that particular training command, ended up in bombers. My co-pilot, on the other hand, who went through California, applied for P-38s, which apparently they could do there, ended up being a B-24 co-pilot, which was not his exact idea of how war ought to be fought. Anyway, so your mother and I then have we had a little bit of a hiatus for several months. We had a lot of heavy correspondence to begin with, and then about the time I went overseas, and that died out for a while, then it picked up again, and by the time I got my missions all phoned and home again, which was on the 31st of July, she had been moved to Great Falls.
This is 45.
45, Falls, 1st of August 45. I'd been home about a week or two, traveling around Northwest with Pop on his lumber travel and so on. They dropped the bomb at Hiroshima. I read about in the papers that's a bunch of damn nonsense, they don't have any bomb like that. They did.
You dropped a few bombs in your time?
Yeah, I dropped didn't have anything like that. Then I got on an airplane, flew up to Great Falls, and spent a couple of days up there, and then...
What was it, Great Falls?
Hartley.
Oh.
Your mother was working there then. So we're wandering down the sidewalk one night. Oh, Maynard Nelson was stationed there at the time, too. That was a crucial factor. Wandering down the sidewalk with your mother one evening, and this is my version. She very subtly maneuvered me across the sidewalk to a jewelry store window, and showed me a ring that she had her eye on. I think she showed me a silver pattern that she liked.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, the upshot of it was that I think I made 2 trips to Great Falls. Maynard, living there, was a commissioned officer as I was, but he was local station, so he was able to endorse a check that the jeweler would take to buy the ring. Oh, here we go. In the meantime, then I get sent to San Antonio to be discharged. And so she quit her job, as was the wont in those days. Nobody ever thought of anything else. And she came down to California, to Los Angeles, Hollywood. And I took 2 hotel rooms, different floors if I remember rightly, made a difference. And she spent 3 or 4 days, we did, in Hollywood, went to see the sights, and you saw the picture and so on, was taken to the nightclub and all that. And then I finally got my discharge and come back to Spokane and then down to Portland. Meantime, her sister Mabel and June were living in Portland, so she came down there and we made arrangements and got married at Brother Bob's house on the 5th of November.
9th. I was born the 5th.
Oh, 9th of November, that's right. That's right, we just barely made it. No, we didn't not quite make it. Yeah, we were married on the 5th. You were born on the 5th, we were married on the 9th. Yeah, we almost made it. Just a couple of years. Anyway, so, and I guess you say that the rest of that is history. That was, my first job was adjusting automobile insurance for Allstate, working for B.W. Bothe, who was a big fat slob, uncouth. Did that for about a year.
And where did we live in? Where did you
Portland.
live in?
We lived in Portland.
What,
Park Road had a little apartment in a house out to 105th and Sandy in Portland. Share the bath and share a refrigerator, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Housing was scarce. In the meantime, Brother Bob had bought this long, narrow acre down near Oswego on Railroad Avenue and divided up into 3 long, narrow lots. Built 3 very cheap houses. Ours was the best one of the bunch. We had 2x6 floor joists on 24-inch centers. We had double floors. The rest of them said single floors. We bought it unfinished and ended up finishing it. It served its purpose.
So that's where you lived after the apartment?
Yeah, we moved from the apartment down to there. That's where you were born, was in that house. We lived in that house. And then we sold that. Well, in the meantime, I quit adjusting. I didn't like that business. Went to work selling sterling silver, Westmoreland sterling. It did real well.
This is door to door, or how do
No,
you solicit?
sold in the home by appointment.
I see.
What's called the wherever plan. I get a lead. I know fashion we'll talk about. Usually I think either your mother, mostly your Aunt Lucille did my telephoning for me. Would call this lead and say their name had been given us for somebody who might be interested in seeing this new sterling silver pattern, blah, 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 whatever the pattern was. And Miss Hartley be in your area, or would choose to be better. And I would go then at this appointment and had this sort of a book, a display book, and I had the pattern and the polishing cloth and the dime half blacked out and a couple of beat up old pieces of silver plate, quite an interesting spiel. My memory is I had a record when I quit of something like selling 110 sets in 105 presentations.
Good salesman.
Well, it was a natural. Sold to a single working girl, basically. The highlight of my career is that I got into a girls' hotel. Girls' residential hotel. I had them out there in the audience. Probably had 10 or 15 of them out there in the audience. I'm up in front putting on a show for them. And I could see real quick that if I sat down with each one of them individually to fill out their conditional sales contract, that the rest of them were going to drift away. So I passed out their contracts and had them fill them out. And I sold them 5 or 6 sets that night. That ups your average, see.
Sure. Yeah.
And catch double headers with a mother and daughter, for example, that sort of thing.
So single girls would buy these?
Oh yeah.
This was not engagement things?
Oh no. And of course, about halfway through my career there, they ran out of silver, ran out of steel, couldn't get knives. So then we changed our sales pattern. Now we're selling dessert sets. Teaspoon and salad fork. Pointing out, that most of your use at this time is going to be for serving desserts, and that's where you need teaspoons and stuff. That worked real well. You sell more of them that way. Then once they had bought, then they were given the opportunity to give me the names of 6 girls, only 6, that you think might be interested in seeing this sterling. And for every one of them, who in turn starts her sterling, you will be able to buy a teaspoon or a salad fork or a sugar cell for half price. So choose, will you think will really be the best person for me to show this to, so that you can get half price sterling. That's the wherever plan. And it worked. Had more leads than I could handle. So, but I got feeling guilty because I got feeling strangely. I got feeling guilty about the fellows who was taking advantage of these little innocent little girls.
Is this expensive stuff?
Oh, you bet it's expensive. Not expensive in today's standards, but for his time it was expensive. Of course, sterling silver.
This is on an installment plan,
Oh, yeah,
piece at a time, or did
so
they
I
buy,
could, yeah,
did you
always
deliver the
installment.
entire set, or did
Oh,
they receive
yeah.
delivery at one piece at a time?
Yeah. And we see the standard that we tried to sell is either a 3 for 3 for 8 or a 4 for 6. Either knife, fork, and spoon for 8 people, 8-place setting, or a 4-piece salad, dessert, knife, and spoon for 6. Service for 6, 4 pieces. And that was the standard offering. If they wanted more, of course, that's how everything it was. I quit that just about the time the first girls were getting their contracts paid off and would have been ready to reorder another. So I quit at the wrong time. My brother John, in a sense, persuaded me out to try selling life insurance. So I went to work for Manufacturers Life, and Gil Cato, who was the manager, handed me a rate book and says, goodbye, good luck, and have fun, I didn't last long at that. So in the summer of 1948, we decide I'm going to go to college, GI Bill. So I go to the VA and take a bunch of tests, and they come out that I should be, took a strong vocational interest blanket, what I took, maybe a cooter and a couple other things. They decide I should be a math science teacher. Well, my math knowledge was zilch. Science I understood some, but you can't do science without math. So I go up to Lewis and Clark, and I take the GED tests. They had a system there where I could take a GED test, General Education Development Test, in a variety of subject matters. And so there were 6 areas I could take, and I topped out in 5 of the 6, which meant I got college credit in 5 different areas. See which 5 did I get? I got English, literature, a whole bunch of them anyway. So I picked up a whole bunch of college credits. So one semester, but I couldn't apply until I was there for a term or something or other. So one semester, I started in the summertime as a freshman. By fall, I was a junior. A second semester junior. So I went through Lewis and Clark in 21 months with a 3.746. And I've always felt bitter they wouldn't round that to 3.75 and make it cum laude, but they refused to do that.
And where were you living at the time?
39th, where we moved. Your mother went to the hospital to deliver Jean from Lake Grove and came home to 39th Avenue.
What was the address? Or what was the
6400 block on southeast 39th, Eastmoreland, called Eastmoreland Heights. So,
and that was a purchase?
Yeah.
You bought that?
Bought that on contract. $10,000. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, full basement. Nice little house. And so graduated from Lewis Clark then, and getting ready to graduate. Fred Thompson became friends there.
So he was a Lewis and Clark grad too?
Yeah, he'd done his first 2 years, I guess it was, at Oregon State. He transferred to Lewis and Clark on the GI Bill, and he and I went down to the University of Oregon, talked to Leona Tyler about graduate school.
And you were both in psychology?
Yeah, both in psychology. In my case, due largely to the influence of one professor named Richard Risley Morgan, who really set me on fire as far as psychology is concerned, with particular reference to research aspect. So then we went down to see Leona Tyler about graduate school, and her position was, that the doctoral degree is the background and you specialize in your postdoctoral work. And we were both married and had a bunch of half a dozen kids, so we could not get to see that philosophy, so we said thanks, but no thanks. So I get on an airplane, make an appointment, get on an airplane, fly to Denver. Have an appointment with Lawrence, I don't think the name of the chairman, Larry Miller, chairman of graduate school in psychology at the University of Denver. And I make an appointment, I fly down there to see him, which I think was a sure move. And fine, no problem. And so we sell our house and tried to sell our house in Portland. Couldn't do it. We moved to Denver, rented it for a while, moved to Denver. Fred moved with us. We, about Denver. And in due course of time, we come back here to, I'm there a year, and I get a letter from Lewis and Clark asking me if I would come back and teach summer school. But they had a guy that they had hired that they just had to fire. There was no how to teach, so we came back. Brother John arranged a house for us to occupy.
I remember that house, it seemed like.
Yeah, the way out south west. And not very far from Lewis Clark. So we taught that summer, went back. And the following year came back and we sold our house. How did that work? Anyway, one night, about midnight one night, your mother and you were all gone back to Denver. No, they gone to Spokane, gone over to Spokane. So I get in my car one night, drive up here to Tacoma, because I'd heard there was a hospital up here. And in the morning I called and I got talking to Robert W. Brown, Clinical Director at Western State Hospital. And he invited me to come out and look around, and I did. He told me there are two ways to get here. One will make it seem like we're downtown, the other will make it seem like we're way out in the country. So I took the out in the country route and went out through Chambers Creek in that way. And so I get there about 10 o'clock in the morning. He says, come on, we're gonna make rounds. And so we start out walking through the wards as you make this hospital rounds, daily rounds. And he's telling me about the hospital, and this is the geriatrics ward and so on. We ended up in what turned out to be the research building. And he said, you know, this is the research building. The money was appropriated by the 1946 legislature. The 1948 legislature is going to equip it. The 1950 legislature is going to staff it. Unfortunately, we had the earthquake, you know, in '49, and so we were behind schedule. But this is what it is. And this wing, or this floor up here, is the library. Next to that is where we have the something or other, and down here is where there is this, and this is where you will this, and this is where you will that, and down here is where we will have. Down here is where you will have your EEG lab. So started out we. By the time we got to the ground floor, it was you. Which is kind of interesting. Problem was they had a psychologist, of sorts, real nice gal, had a master's degree, who was engaged to marry a local physician. So as soon as that came through, and then she was going to resign, and the job would be mine. Except this physician up and had himself a heart attack, which postponed the wedding, which she resigned anyway. In the meantime, Robert W. Brown wrote a job description, which specified everything except my birth date. And so that was how I ended up as Chief Clinical Psychologist -- Electroencephalographer at Western State Hospital. I was there for 2.5 years, and then from there to Beckley. And of course, I left Western State under a bit of a cloud.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I still have the clipping.
Yeah, I remember.
Front page of the paper.
Front page of the Tacoma News Tribune.
You bet. State Hospital doctor quits, blasts program. Went out over the AP wire.
How did that make the newspaper?
Well, what happened was I got this job in West Virginia, and so I resigned. And I was very big in the local mental health association at the time, and so Mildred Janes was quite a goer. She found out about it, and so she sent a newspaper reporter out to talk to me. He came out with the photographer and took a picture, you know.
Is this on Fairway? Or at the
Fairway.
hospital, I guess?
Yeah, no, at the hospital. And so I told him what I thought about the program. In fact, it had no theoretical orientation. And said, I was quoted as having said something I didn't really say, but I would kind of wish I had, because the guy said it better than I could, which is that if you have an organization which sets minimum standards, you're going to end up with people with minimum competence. When there's no reward for excellence. That went over like a big brass bubble. But that night, Frank Shovlin, the superintendent, showed up at the Mental Health Association meeting for the first time in his career. I'm at the meeting down at Mildred Jane's house. A huge big house down here in Yakima with a big, you know the one?
No, not really.
Oh, it's right down here in Yakima.
Is it blue?
No, it's dark brown, about tall peak building around the corner of about North 4th and Yakima. Who do I buy it? Anyway, we're having this Mental Health Association meeting, a board meeting or something or other, and the phone rings, and they come and get me, and guess who it is? It's my father, calls from Spokane. What's this? I saw your name, saw your name in the paper. Came out over the news. He just listened to the evening news on the radio.
Holy smoke.
That's the way it is, Pop. I was petrified then that it might make enough of a splash I'd be out of a job in West Virginia, but it was a tempest in a teapot. Nothing really changed. So then they're back to Beckley.
Well, thank you very
And
much.
you know the rest.
Well, I don't know the rest.
What don't you know?
Well, what I'd like to do is stop this and we'll get Mom
Get her version
for
of her life.
for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then we'll get you together.
Okay, that seems fair.